The radio on Eli's dashboard crackled just as his phone started vibrating in the cup holder. He ignored both and kept his eyes on the snowbank ahead. A half-collapsed tent edge poked through the white like a torn sleeve. His coffee from the ranger station had gone cold hours ago, untouched. When he unzipped the tent, the smell of damp nylon and human breath hit him. Someone was inside. Alive. And the first thing he noticed was a handwritten note taped to a backpack that read, in shaky ink, "I didn't know where else to go." Eli Mercer had worked winter patrol in northern Colorado for 8 years. He knew the sound of snow under boots and the way the wind changed when a storm was about to turn mean. What he didn't know anymore was how to talk to people outside of work. His marriage had ended quietly the previous spring, like a light switched off in a room no one used much anyway. One day his wife moved her plants and boxes into a rented townhouse near Fort Collins. The next day, the house felt larger and emptier, and Eli slept on one side of the bed out of habit. He lived alone now in a small ranch house that still smelled faintly like lemon cleaner and old pine. The fridge held deli meat, mustard, and a carton of eggs he kept forgetting to cook. On mornings before patrol, he sat at the kitchen counter scrolling his phone, reading messages from his sister back in Ohio and ignoring the dating app notifications that made him feel tired just looking at them. The job paid enough to cover the mortgage and his truck payment, but barely. Overtime helped. Winter storms helped more. They meant extra shifts, longer days, and fewer hours spent thinking about the quiet waiting for him at home. That morning started like any other. Gray sky. Heavy snow. A call from dispatch about a missing hiker that turned out to be a broken trail marker. By noon, the storm had thickened, swallowing the tree line and flattening sound. Eli drove his route slow and careful, heater blasting, hands steady on the wheel. He thought about the voicemail he still hadn't deleted from his ex, left months ago. It wasn't angry. That somehow made it worse. When he spotted the tent, it didn't make sense at first. Camping was closed in that section of the park during winter. The rule was clear. He pulled over anyway, hazard lights blinking uselessly in the whiteout. His boots sank deep as he walked up the slope. The tent was small, cheap, and clearly not meant for this weather. Snow had piled over most of it. Someone had tried to shovel it clear with bare hands. Eli called out, his voice flat and professional. No answer. He felt that familiar tightening in his chest that came with emergencies, the part of him that knew exactly what to do while the rest of the world went quiet. Inside the tent, a woman sat wrapped in a thin blanket, her knees pulled tight to her chest. She looked to be in her late 20s, maybe early 30s. Her hair was dark and matted, her face pale but alert. No blood. No obvious injuries. Just exhaustion so deep it seemed to press her down into the ground. "I'm not supposed to be here," she said before he could speak. Her voice was calm in a way that scared him more than panic would have. Eli told her his name and asked for hers. "Maya," she said. She didn't look at him when she spoke. Her eyes stayed on the note taped to the backpack. He knew the protocol. He was supposed to radio it in, call for backup, and issue a citation at minimum. Unauthorized camping. Endangerment. The words lined up in his head like cold facts. But standing there, watching her hands shake as she tried to zip her jacket, the rules felt far away. He offered her his spare gloves. She hesitated, then took them like they might disappear if she moved too fast. They talked in pieces. She had lost her job in Denver 3 months earlier. The lease ended. A friend let her crash on a couch until that fell apart too. She said the shelter was full, that she'd tried twice. She said the mountains felt quieter than the city, less judging. She said she thought she could handle one night. Eli thought about his empty house and the silence he filled with TV noise. He thought about how thin the line was between having a place and not. He felt something crack open in him, slow and painful. He helped her out of the tent and into his truck, wrapped her in an emergency blanket, turned the heat up until the windows fogged. He radioed dispatch and gave a version of the truth that left room to breathe. He didn't mention the citation. He didn't mention the note. As they drove toward the ranger station, Maya stared out the window at the snow sliding past. "I didn't think anyone would find me," she said. Eli kept his eyes on the road. "I did," he replied, and for the first time in months, the words felt like they meant something. The ranger station smelled like burnt coffee and wet wool. Maya sat on a plastic chair near the wall heater, her boots lined up neatly beside her like she was afraid of taking up too much space. Eli handed her a paper cup of hot chocolate from the vending machine. It was too sweet, the kind kids liked, but she wrapped both hands around it anyway. "You can warm up here for a bit," he said. "Storm's supposed to last another hour or two." She nodded, eyes on the steam rising from the cup. "Thank you for not yelling." Eli gave a small shrug. Didn't seem like yelling would help. That was the first almost smile he saw from her. It didn't last long, but it was there. Protocol said he should have called social services immediately. Protocol said he should document everything. Instead, he filled out paperwork slower than usual and let the silence stretch. Another ranger passed through, nodded, didn't ask questions. Everyone was tired. Winter did that to people. Maya eventually spoke again. "You live around here?" "Yeah. About 20 minutes down the road." She hesitated. "Must be nice. Quiet." "It is," he said, then paused. "Sometimes too quiet." That got her attention. She looked up at him for real this time. Her eyes were tired but sharp, like someone who noticed details even when they wished they didn't. "I used to think quiet was scary," she said. Then Denver got loud in a way that felt worse. Eli leaned against the counter. He wasn't used to talking like this at work. Conversations here were usually about trail conditions or weather reports. This felt personal in a way that made him slightly uncomfortable, which also made him stay. She told him small things. That she'd studied graphic design but ended up doing marketing work she hated. That layoffs came with a polite email and a calendar invite. That her parents lived in Arizona and thought she was figuring things out. She said that part like it tasted bad. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer fixes. He just listened, surprised by how easy that part felt. When the storm eased, Eli drove her to a warming center in a nearby town. It was run out of a community church with folding tables, donated coats, and volunteers who smiled too much because smiling was easier than asking hard questions. Maya stood by the entrance, hands shoved deep into borrowed pockets. "So this is it," she said. "For tonight," Eli replied. "They'll help you figure out next steps." She nodded, then did something unexpected. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her backpack. "This is my number," she said, holding it out. "You don't have to call. I just didn't want this to feel like I disappeared again." Eli took the paper. The rule-breaking part of his brain flared, then quieted. It was just a number. Just paper. Still, it felt heavier than it should have. "I'll check in," he said. He meant it. That night, back in his house, the silence didn't feel as empty. He reheated leftovers he barely tasted and sat on the couch scrolling through news he didn't care about. The folded paper sat on the coffee table, untouched. He thought about boundaries. About professionalism. About how many times he'd followed every rule and still ended up alone on one side of a bed. He thought about Maya's note. "I didn't know where else to go." Around 9, he texted her. Just a simple message. "You make it inside, okay?" The reply came fast. "Yeah. Warm. Thank you again." That should have been the end of it. Instead, they kept texting in short bursts. Nothing heavy. Complaints about bad vending machine food. A shared dislike of automatic email signatures. It felt safe because it was small. Over the next week, Eli checked in once a day. Sometimes she replied right away. Sometimes hours later. She never overshared. Neither did he. Still, something steady formed between the messages. A rhythm. One afternoon, after a long patrol shift, Eli stopped at a grocery store instead of driving straight home. He bought actual vegetables. Real coffee. Standing in the checkout line, he realized he was thinking about what he might cook if someone else were there to eat it too. The thought surprised him enough that he laughed under his breath. Maya found a temporary spot at the center helping organize donations. It wasn't paid, but it gave her something to do, somewhere to be. She told him that part like it mattered, like she was reminding herself. "I keep waiting for the floor to drop out," she texted one night. "Yeah, Eli replied. I get that. He didn't tell her about the voicemail he still hadn't deleted. He didn't tell her how often he sat in his truck after work, engine off, just breathing. But when she said she was scared to hope for anything, he understood it in a way that felt uncomfortably close. The connection wasn't dramatic. It didn't fix anything. It just existed, quiet and real, like a light left on in another room. And for the first time in a long while, Eli didn't rush to turn it off. The trouble with small connections is that they grow quietly. You don't notice until you realize how much space they've taken up. For Eli, it happened on a Tuesday night. He'd come home late after helping clear a fallen tree near the southern trailhead. Snow clung to his jacket. His shoulders ached in that deep, dull way that didn't go away with sleep. He tossed his keys on the counter, kicked off his boots, and reached for his phone out of habit. No new message from Maya. He told himself it didn't mean anything. She had her own life, her own stress. Still, the house felt heavier than usual. The quiet pressed in, familiar and sharp. He warmed up soup he barely touched and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the screen like it might explain something if he waited long enough. The voicemail from his ex popped into his head again, uninvited. He finally opened it and listened, standing there with the microwave humming behind him. Her voice sounded calm, careful. I just wanted to say I hope you're okay, she'd said. I know we both tried. I don't regret that. When it ended, the kitchen felt too small. Eli sat down hard in the chair. He realized, with a slow, sinking clarity, that he'd been using the job, the weather, even Maya's messages as a way to avoid sitting with what was actually broken in him. He was good in emergencies. He was good at helping other people survive hard moments. But when it came to his own life, he kept things at arm's length, afraid of needing anything too much. His phone buzzed an hour later. Sorry. Rough day, Maya texted. Relief came first, then something else underneath it. Fear. You okay? He typed. I don't know, she replied. I thought I was doing better. Today just hit me. Eli stared at the words. This was the moment where lines blurred. Where support could turn into dependence. He'd seen it before on the job. People clinging because it felt safer than standing alone. Want to talk? He asked, careful. She didn't answer right away. When she did, it was longer than usual. She told him the center was cutting back volunteers. That a caseworker mentioned a wait list for housing that could take months. That she'd run into an old coworker at a coffee shop who asked, casually, so what are you up to these days? Like unemployment wasn't a thing that changed the air around you. I went back to the church bathroom and cried, she wrote. I felt stupid for thinking I was past that. Eli leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He could picture it too clearly. The harsh lighting. The hum of the fan. The way shame showed up when you least expected it. He wanted to drive over there. Wanted to do something concrete. Offer a couch. A solution. That impulse scared him. Instead, he typed, you're not stupid. You're dealing with a lot. A pause. I hate feeling like this, she replied. Like I'm always one step from disappearing again. The words landed hard. Eli thought about the tent buried in snow. About how close she'd come to being missed entirely. He also thought about himself, sitting in a house that technically counted as stability, still feeling lost. He realized then that what hurt wasn't just concern for her. It was the mirror she held up. Her fear echoed his own, stripped of the uniforms and routines that hid it. That night, sleep didn't come easily. He lay awake listening to the heater kick on and off, his mind looping. Was he helping, or was he avoiding his own emptiness by stepping into someone else's chaos? Where did responsibility end and attachment begin? A few days later, things came to a head. Eli stopped by the warming center on his day off, telling himself it was just to drop off extra blankets the station had. Maya was there, sorting donated gloves. She looked smaller somehow, shoulders tight, eyes tired. They stood outside afterward, cold air biting at their faces. I didn't expect you to come, she said. Me neither, he admitted. There was an awkward pause. Snow crunched under passing boots. The building buzzed behind them. I'm scared I'm leaning on you too much, Maya said suddenly. I don't want to be that person. Eli swallowed. I was thinking the same thing. From the other side. They both laughed softly, the sound thin but honest. I don't want to mess this up, she added. Whatever this is. He nodded. Me neither. But pretending it's nothing doesn't feel right either. That was the breaking point. Not a fight. Not a dramatic goodbye. Just two people standing in the cold, admitting fear instead of running from it. Eli realized he couldn't save her. And she couldn't fill the quiet in his house. What they could do was choose honesty, even when it meant stepping back a little. I think we both need to make sure we're standing on our own feet, he said carefully. Even if we check in along the way. Maya looked down, then back up. Her eyes were wet, but steady. Yeah, she said. I think you're right. It hurt more than he expected. Letting go of the idea that connection meant rescue. Accepting that care didn't have to mean control. As Eli drove home, the mountains dark against the sky, he felt raw and strangely lighter. For the first time, he wasn't hiding from the truth of his own loneliness. He was looking straight at it, unsure what came next, but willing to find out. Winter didn't end all at once. It loosened slowly, like it wasn't sure it was done yet. Snowbanks shrank into grey piles at the edges of parking lots. Trails reopened in sections. Eli noticed the change most in the mornings, when the light crept into his kitchen earlier than it used to. Life didn't suddenly get easier. It just got more honest. After that conversation outside the warming center, Eli and Maya didn't text every day anymore. At first, the gap felt like withdrawal. He'd catch himself reaching for his phone during lunch breaks, then stopping. The silence was uncomfortable, but it was different from before. It wasn't empty. It was intentional. Eli started doing things he'd been putting off for months. He called a therapist his sister had mentioned last year and booked an appointment before he could talk himself out of it. The waiting room smelled like disinfectant and cheap air freshener. He sat there feeling ridiculous and exposed, then surprised himself by answering questions without joking them away. He talked about the marriage. About how he avoided conflict by being useful. About how being needed felt safer than being known. Saying it out loud didn't fix it, but it made the shape of the problem clearer. At home, he cooked more. Burned a few meals. Ate standing up at the counter anyway. On weekends, instead of picking up extra shifts automatically, he hiked trails that had nothing to do with work. He left his radio behind. The quiet felt earned now. Maya stayed busy too. She got on the housing wait list, then another one, then a third. She picked up part-time work cleaning offices at night. It wasn't what she wanted, but it paid a little and didn't ask questions. During the day, she kept helping at the center, partly because it gave her structure and partly because she didn't want to disappear from herself again. They checked in occasionally. A short message. A shared joke about bad coffee. No late-night spirals. No promises. Just awareness. One afternoon in early spring, Eli ran into Maya by accident at a small coffee shop near the highway. She was sitting alone with a laptop covered in stickers, headphones around her neck. She looked healthier. Not magically better. Just steadier. Hey, she said, surprised but smiling. Hey, he replied, genuinely glad. They ordered coffee and sat down together, both a little awkward, both okay with it. I got a short-term rental, she told him. 6 months. It's tiny, but it's mine. That's huge, Eli said, and meant it. She shrugged, but her eyes lit up. It feels like breathing again. She asked how he was. He told her the truth. About therapy. About learning to sit with uncomfortable feelings instead of fixing them. About realizing that loneliness wasn't a personal failure, just a human condition that needed attention. That sounds hard, she said. It is, he replied. But it's also kind of relieving. They talked for an hour. Not about the tent. Not about rules broken or saved. Just about normal things. Work. Music. How strange it felt to plan more than a week ahead. When they stood to leave, there was no dramatic pause. No unspoken question hanging between them. I'm really glad you found your footing, Eli said. Maya nodded. I'm really glad you didn't try to carry me. They walked out into the afternoon sun and went separate ways. That night, Eli sat on his back porch with a mug of coffee, watching the sky fade from blue to gray. The mountains were still there, steady and indifferent. His phone buzzed once. A text from Maya. Thanks for today. It was good to see you. He typed back, yeah. It really was. Then he set the phone down. The small win wasn't dramatic. No grand reunion. No sweeping change. Just two people who met in a moment of crisis and chose not to turn that moment into a lifelong crutch. Eli still had quiet nights. Maya still had days where fear crept in. But neither of them was buried anymore. They had learned something important the hard way. Sometimes the most meaningful rule you break isn't written down anywhere. It's the one that says you have to disappear when things get hard. And sometimes, surviving isn't about being rescued. It's about being seen, standing back up, and choosing, again and again, to keep going. If you've ever been at that edge, or found someone else there, your story probably doesn't end cleanly either. And that doesn't make it less real. It just means you're human.